Tom detectado, apocalyptic symbolism, baseado na análise de simbolismo escatológico, contexto imperial romano e interpretação do livro do Apocalipse. /titulo 2. The missing text. The Book of Revelation contains some of the most striking and enduring imagery in all of ancient literature. In chapter 6, as the first 4 seals of a heavenly scroll are opened, 4 riders are summoned to the earth. Most people immediately recognize them by their traditional titles. We call them Conquest, War, Famine, and Death. In modern popular culture, the first rider is frequently renamed Pestilence. They are the ultimate symbols of human suffering and divine judgment. But a careful reading of the original biblical text reveals a surprising detail that completely changes how we understand this famous passage. The text explicitly names only one of the 4 riders. The 4th horseman, riding a pale horse, is named Death, and Hades follows closely behind him. The other 3 riders are never given names in the text. That familiar list of titles was not written by the Apostle John. It was constructed over centuries of theological interpretation, cultural adaptation, and artistic representation. So where did these specific identities come from? And what did the earliest Christian readers believe these terrifying figures were originally meant to represent? To understand the detail most people miss, we have to examine the exact description of the first rider. When the first seal is broken, a voice like thunder calls out. The author writes that he looked, and there was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. For centuries, this brief description has generated more debate than almost any other figure in the Apocalypse. The problem lies in the specific symbols associated with him. In the ancient Roman world, the white horse was traditionally a symbol of victory and triumph. Victorious generals rode white horses during military parades through the streets of Rome. Because of this, one of the earliest and most influential interpretations argued that this first rider was not a force of destruction at all, but rather a representation of Jesus Christ or the victorious spread of the Christian gospel. Irenaeus, a prominent theologian in the 2nd century, championed this view. He pointed to a later chapter in Revelation, chapter 19, which explicitly describes Christ returning on a white horse. For many early readers, it seemed logical to connect the 2 white horses. But that interpretation creates a significant contradiction. If the first rider is Christ, why is he summoned by one of the 4 living creatures, and why is his arrival grouped with war, famine, and death? Furthermore, the crown given to the first rider is the Greek word stephanos, which is a victor's wreath, like those won in athletic games. The crown worn by Christ in chapter 19 is the diadem, the crown of legitimate royalty. And while Christ is armed with a sword in later chapters, this first rider carries a bow. That single weapon, the bow, completely shifts the historical context. In the late 1st century, when Revelation was written, the Roman Empire feared one specific enemy above all others. To the east lay the Parthian Empire, renowned for its devastating cavalry. The Parthians were famous for riding white horses and attacking with deadly accuracy using the bow. To a 1st century audience living in Roman territory, a rider on a white horse carrying a bow would not look like a peaceful spiritual victor. He would look like the ultimate military nightmare, the threat of foreign invasion from the edges of the known world. This historical context explains why later scholars began to view the first rider not as Christ, but as a symbol of military conquest, imperialism, and the bloodshed that inevitably follows. The identification of this rider as Pestilence is an entirely modern invention, popularized in the early 20th century to explain the plagues that swept across the world, completely ignoring the original military symbolism of the bow. The idea that the first rider represents infectious sickness likely stems from a loose reading of a later verse, which states that power was given to the riders to kill by sword, famine, and plague. But the Greek word used there for plague refers back to the fourth rider, not the first. When we examine the original Greek text, the words chosen by the author emphasize an obsession with dominance. The phrase translated as conquering and to conquer is rooted in the Greek word nikao, which means to overcome or vanquish. This is a relentless, aggressive force. It is the ambition of empires to expand their borders, regardless of the human cost. By presenting this unnamed conqueror first, the author establishes a profound point. The apocalyptic disasters that follow are not arbitrary. They are the direct, unavoidable consequences of human imperial ambition and the relentless desire to dominate others. The terrifying progression from this initial conquest to the subsequent riders requires us to step back into the world of the late first century. To fully grasp why this specific imagery was so powerful, we must understand the political and cultural environment in which the author, John, was writing. At the time, the Roman Empire spanned the known world, heavily promoting a concept known as the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace. According to imperial propaganda, Rome had brought stability, order, and prosperity to the nations it conquered. But for the marginalized Christian communities scattered across Asia Minor, this peace was maintained through brutal suppression and the constant threat of violence. John was writing from the island of Patmos, likely during the reign of the Emperor Domitian. He was using a recognized genre known as apocalyptic literature. This style of writing frequently employed vivid symbolism, cosmic imagery, and numerology to critique earthly empires without drawing immediate charges of treason. The imagery of the horses was not entirely new. John was heavily influenced by the ancient Hebrew prophets, specifically the book of Zechariah, which describes 4 chariots pulled by differently colored horses patrolling the earth. But John adapts this ancient vision, transforming the horses from spiritual sentinels into active agents of history. This historical backdrop brings the second rider into sharp focus. When the second seal is opened, a fiery red horse emerges. The text states that its rider was given the power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. He is given a large sword. This shatters the illusion of the Roman peace. It reveals that an empire built on conquest inevitably leads to continuous conflict. The specific Greek word used for sword here is machaira. This was not the long sword of cavalry, but rather the short sword commonly carried by the Roman infantry, and it was also the term used for a sacrificial knife. This detail suggests not just war between nations, but civil slaughter and internal rebellion. The readers of Revelation still carried the traumatic memory of the year 69, known as the Year of the Four Emperors, when the Roman Empire nearly tore itself apart in violent civil war. Following war comes the inevitable collapse of the food supply, represented by the third rider on a black horse. Black was universally recognized in the ancient world as the color of mourning, grief, and starvation. This rider carries a pair of scales in his hand. A voice announces that a quart of wheat will cost a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley will cost a denarius, but the oil and the wine must not be harmed. This is not a description of a natural drought. It is a terrifying portrait of economic injustice and engineered famine. In the 1st century, a denarius was the standard daily wage for a laborer. A quart of wheat provided barely enough calories for one person to survive for a single day. This meant a worker would spend their entire daily income just to feed themselves, leaving absolutely nothing for their family. Barley, which was considered animal feed or the food of the absolute poorest, was slightly cheaper, but still outrageously inflated. Yet, the luxury items of the rich, the oil and the wine, remained untouched by the crisis. This specific detail resonates deeply with an actual historical event from the period. Around the year 92, the empire faced a severe grain shortage. The Emperor Domitian issued an edict ordering that half of the vineyards in the provinces be destroyed and replaced with grain fields. The wealthy elite, who profited massively from the wine trade, fiercely protested the decree. Domitian eventually backed down and reversed the order. As a result, the wealthy secured their luxury wine, while the lower classes continued to starve for bread. When the earliest Christians heard the description of the third rider, they were not imagining an abstract future event. They were hearing a sharp critique of the systemic economic exploitation happening right outside their doors. The sequence is logical and historically grounded. First, unchecked imperial ambition rides out to conquer. Second, the resulting instability leads to civil war and mass violence. Third, conflict destroys the agricultural infrastructure, resulting in hyperinflation and severe economic disparity. The progression builds a devastating chain of cause and effect, leading directly to the fourth and most dreadful consequence. The stage is completely set for the arrival of the final horseman, the only one the text actually names. Continuo para proxima part tres. The arrival of the fourth rider completes the cycle of devastation. He rides a pale horse, and his name is Death. Hades follows closely behind him. The Greek word translated as pale is chloros, which refers to the sickly, yellowish-green color of a rotting corpse or a field of withered grass. This is not just an individual personification of the end of life. It is an unstoppable force that claims a quarter of the earth. He is given authority to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. This culmination provides the final answer to our investigation. The popular claim that these four riders are unrelated figures of the distant future ignores the immediate, visceral reality of the text. When we synthesize the historical evidence, the original language and the literary context of the first century, we see that the apocalypse is not just a prediction, it is an analysis. The author was describing the inevitable trajectory of any empire that bases its existence on dominance, exploitation, and the sacrifice of the vulnerable for the sake of the powerful. The detail that most people miss is that these riders are not independent events. They are the symptoms of a single systemic disease of human power. What the evidence supports is that the first rider was an unmistakable reflection of the Roman and Parthian military threat. The second was a critique of civil slaughter. The third was a condemnation of economic inequality. And the fourth was the ultimate result of that destructive chain. These figures are symbols of a pattern that has repeated itself throughout human history, rather than a coded map of a singular final day. The power of the imagery lies precisely in its timeless applicability. Every generation that observes the rise of aggressive imperialism, the outbreak of civil war, the manipulation of food supplies, and the resulting societal collapse finds these symbols reflected in their own reality. What remains uncertain is the specific identity of the first rider, but only if we insist on a singular, static answer. If we accept the historical interpretation, the rider represents the destructive cycle of conquest. If we accept the theological interpretation, he represents the counterfeit victory that mimics the true message of the gospel. The strongest interpretation appears to be a combination of both. He is the embodiment of human ambition masquerading as order and peace. This does not eliminate every alternative interpretation, but it does clarify the author's original intent. The popular claim that the first rider is an external force of sickness or an apocalyptic entity of evil often goes further than the original sources allow. Ultimately, the investigation shows that the Book of Revelation was designed to challenge its readers to see past the propaganda of their own time. It stripped away the veneer of Roman stability to reveal the harsh reality underneath. Whether we view this as a historical critique or a prophetic vision, the message remains clear. The suffering caused by these four horsemen is largely a human creation, born from choices made by the architects of empires. By naming only death, the author shifts our focus away from the mysterious identities of the riders and onto the horrifying outcome of their collective path. The mystery of the four horsemen is not about hidden names or secret codes that identify contemporary figures. It is an enduring warning about the fragility of human society when justice is abandoned for the sake of power. As we close this chapter on the first four seals, we are left with a deeper understanding of how the earliest Christians processed the violence of their world. If you found this investigation into the symbolism of the apocalypse illuminating, and if you would like the next documentary to examine the mystery of the seven seals themselves, please leave the word seals in the comments.